Thank you all for being here. Thank you, organizers of the Lahore Lit Fest, for this wonderful occasion to address, I think, some of the most pressing issues facing Pakistan right now. I'm going to start by throwing out a very fashionable, much used, somewhat annoying word, which is polycrisis. It came up a lot in 2022 in a global context. And I think it sums up pretty well what's happening in Pakistan at this point. This is a country with chronic economic challenges that in 2022 was pushed to the edge by the dislocation that followed the COVID pandemic and then the war in Ukraine, which disrupted world markets. Pakistan now desperately needs to revive its IMF program and to reschedule its debt. But to do that, it needs political stability, which, as everyone in this room knows, is elusive in Pakistan. Adding to this is, of course, environmental crisis caused largely by factors beyond Pakistan's control in last year's devastating floods, which showed this country's vulnerability to climate change and prompted the international community to take the threat seriously enough to come up with a $9 billion package for climate resilience. And then finally, I feel compelled to mention the security challenges that Pakistan perennially faces, which are unfortunately rearing their heads again. Joining me are two panelists, one from the state sector, one from the private sector, who I think are uniquely positioned to analyze what's happening and talk about possible paths for Pakistan out of the crisis, out of the polycrisis. Where do we start? I'm going to put you both on the spot with some questions before we open it up to the audience. First, I think most of you recognize former Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi, who got a good round of applause when he was coming in the room, so I think popular man. And then Mian Mansha, who is one of Pakistan's top business owners, and I gather one of the country's biggest taxpayers as well. Okay. Unfortunately, Maliha Lodi came down ill and is unable to join us today. We would otherwise not have a manel, which is what we do. So I'm eager to hear what our panelists say. I'll stop talking now, but I'll first ask a couple of questions, and then we will leave some time open at the end to hear what your questions are. I'm personally very curious to hear what Pakistanis say about the predicament your country is in now and hear what you think is wrong and how you all fix it. So maybe first question to Shahid. To what extent do you think Pakistan's political class and politicians need to take responsibility for what's happening? And how do you do this? Are the politics broken? And if so, how are they fixed?
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be at the LLF. The question is something that is asked every day in Pakistan. I think if we try to apportion blame, then there is nobody who can be exempt from that blame. So what is the extent of that blame and who is to be blamed? I think that's a debate that can go on forever. But the political class is to blame. There have been external influences in our politics. The military has had long tenures of non-constitutional rule. And during those periods and post those periods, a political class has been created which really are not reflective of the aspirations of the people of Pakistan. So we need to be cognizant of that. And even this process continued when the military had withdrawn to a certain extent from governing Pakistan. So those influences exist even today, and as a result, the people you see in the assemblies, both the national and the provincial, and the people you see in the Senate, in my opinion, most of the people are not reflective of what the people of Pakistan want there. They have come there through various means. Some have used money, some have been compliant or pliant to an extent that they served the purpose that the military wanted, and here we are. So, but the political class has to accept blame. As a comparison, if you look at Pakistan, in 75 years we produced thousands of generals, thousands of bureaucrats, thousands of judges, but we only produced 4 political leaders, which are Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who is not here today. Then you had Muhammad Nawaz Sharif, you had Benazir Bhutto, and today you have Imran Khan. This is all that Pakistan has produced. Now, how do I qualify a political leader? This is a constituency-based system. So to me, a political leader is a person, and I live in the constituency, I work for the constituency, I know the people, but a political leader is a person who comes to my constituency and delivers votes for me. That's a political leader. And today, in today's politics, only, I would say, Mian Nawaz Sharif and Imran Khan can do that. So that's the reality of Pakistan.
So if I can interrupt, you're suggesting that your leaders lack the human qualities of assuming leadership. Are there any institutional challenges around how campaigns are financed, how people come into politics in the first place? Is there anything that you could change in the system?
Well, the results speak for themselves. So if we talk about who is to blame or how did we get here, we need to recognize that post 1985, post the Ziaullah era, there have been changes within the system. There have been governments that have come and gone. So the political leaders have to accept that blame. And the extent of that blame, as I said, can be debated. But I think what we have today is really a result of maybe the interference in politics, but maybe to a larger extent, the inability to understand the situation, the competence that was needed to understand the complex issues, and especially when Pakistan was probably one of the first in the region to move away from a centralized economy to a market-based economy. And Mr. Mansha here is an example of that. In 1990, the MCB was privatized, and he bought MCB in a bid process. Again, if you look at his situation today, 30 years down the road, he still faces the National Accountability Bureau questions on how that privatization took place. So there are a lot of external influences into the political system, into the system of governance, which perhaps are not so visible, but they have a very serious effect on how the decision-making takes place. And that results in the problems that we have today.
When you say external influences, what do you mean? Do you mean big money? Do you mean corruption? Do you mean foreign powers? Can I ask you to spell that out?
No, there is, from the establishment, there is an influence. The judiciary has a very serious influence on the political system. Their decisions have been such that the price that has been paid is not visible. And beyond that, there have been issues of qualifying or disqualifying people from politics. And that has resulted in a political class, like I said, which does not have the competence or the ability or the integrity to solve Pakistan's problems. Corruption is a major issue. But is it the only issue? I would disagree there. Unfortunately, it is the corrupt people that are more acceptable to the establishment than people who have integrity. So over the years, those people have been fostered. We have a Senate, which is the upper house. Every province is equally represented. And in that house, I can safely say more than 50% of the people in that, of the senators, bought their way in, directly or indirectly, whether they paid off their parties or they paid the voters. That's the reality of the...
More than 50%.
More than 50%.
Where do you get that number? That's extraordinary.
I was the Prime Minister and I was there when the Senate elections took place. So I have knowledge beyond what is publicly available.
Okay. I don't want us just to focus on government because every society has multiple players or stakeholders. You made reference to the struggles of the private sector, and I wanted to bring Mian in at this point in the conversation and ask you, this is an economy in Pakistan you have that eternally struggles to pay its way in the world, that doesn't export enough, has too many pairs of hands for the jobs that it creates. What is your prescription? What do you think Pakistan should be doing to create a more viable economy? And do the politics, from your telling, dysfunctional politics feed into this?
Thank you. I think Pakistan's economy has been going down for the last 30 to 40 years. It's not just happened today. And we need to think about it, that what is happening, and we need to a paradigm shift. For example, if anybody does well in business, he's hounded. And they say, you've done this wrong or that wrong. I think I have one thing very common with Shahid Sahab, and that is the NAB should be disbanded. I mean, there have been people who in jail. I think you spent 8 months? Ji. So there are people who spend two years without a charge and all that. But I really failed, and I'm part of the product. When I took over the bank that I run, it made 24 crores profit. And in this December, when I closed, we made 71 billion profit. They call me in the tax department that I am the IMF of Lahore. When they can't collect any money, they come to me, and I pay the tax more than in the short term. I do give them the money. But I think we need to look at it, that the things that we need to do. When this government came in, I met the Prime Minister. I said, please privatize things that we need to privatize. And there are some low-hanging fruits. For example, I told him privatize the airports first. All the major airports in the world, Heathrow, Bombay, Delhi, Istanbul, are all private airports. Mm-hmm. If you go to Lahore airport, you will see, you don't know this, but we call it the Thana, the police station. It looks like not an airport, but a police station, where, there are so many checks, people are being hassled, congestions and all that. Mm-hmm. You privatize these airports, and you will see the difference. There will be expansion, there will be more facilities. Maybe doctors could be sitting there, foreigners who are coming in would get their teeth. They're coming from America, Europe to Pakistan because it's better and cheaper in some ways. So let's do that. And also the government should, when we took over the banks, Habib Bank, UBL, myself and we fired 51,000 people. One day we just fired 51,000 people. The central bank supported us. They gave us cheap loans, and we paid off all these people. Anybody who had service left, if he was 40, then 20 years we paid.
Can you contextualize that a bit, maybe for people who aren't in business? When you say we fired 51,000 people, we'll have people in the audience who say that's terrible, but I think you're making the point.
I'm coming to the point.
Okay, yes, please.
So, let's say we didn't fire them, we separated them. That would be a better word. So we gave them so much money, which they deserved, and we said they went with all that billions of rupees to somebody made a house, somebody made a small business, somebody made a restaurant, and I saw, and I do still see all those people, and that money came into the economy. Mm-hmm. So it's not only the efficiency improves, but you also, and then now, after 30 years, we employ more people than we fired. So that doesn't mean that, you create new services and you create new, debit cards, credit cards, so on, car mortgages and all that. So you can, it's a short-term problem, but you have to do that. For example, in Punjab Food Department employs 140,000 people. So I went to the Chief Minister before you, sir, and I said to him, we'll give you a loan, all the banks will put together the money, give them a golden handshake, let them go. And, so what we need to do is to make the government smaller. You come from UK,
Yes.
and I have been in UK during those times when I saw Maggie Thatcher, the Prime Minister, how many things she privatized so boldly. And she went under so much criticism in the Parliament, but she held it. And the coal miners, you remember Arthur Scargill, strikes,
Yes.
all the mess they had. She even privatized water boards.
So this gets back to what Shahid was saying. I mean, it's about getting the personalities. I think you suggested, right? The person that will lead Pakistan into the future. I mean, do you have personalities like this in politics? It's a question for both of you, really.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
I think we have. He's one guy, and I'll tell you why. When the last time Nawaz Sharif government came, they came to my house, and the ministers were decided who's going to do what. Shahid knows that I recommended there should be one ministry for energy, not two ministers, petroleum and water and power. Because it's one, and it's really complicated to coordinate the two ministries. So the decision was not made in my favor. But as we were getting out of that room, Shahid told me he had become Minister for Petroleum at that time. And he said, I don't mind working under this guy, the other one, but it should be one ministry. So I've worked with him, and he's done things, and he's clear-headed about things, So people like him need to come forward.
Yeah.
And I think he can do a very good job, frankly.
Here's a. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah. I think the question of competence is critical in Pakistan today. I can safely say to you, if you take the National Assembly or the Senate from where the federal cabinet comes, you'll be pushed to get 3 competent ministers. This is the reality of Pakistan today. The federal government is literally down to 3 major ministries today: the finance, power and petroleum. You'll be pushed to get 3 people to run those ministries. And why has that happened? Because the world has changed. So politics has to change accordingly. And this is not just a problem in Pakistan. Today, to be a minister, you must have an education, not just a degree. The second thing, you must have life experience. You must have done something in life, held a job, done a business. And the third thing, you must go through the political mill. So people today get elected, they become members of the National Assembly, they are qualified to be ministers, but they can't be the ministers the next day. They have to understand how government works. It's all a market-based situation now. This is not a centralized administrative ministries anymore. So that's where we are failing. We fail to maybe attract people with that competence level into the political structure, or maybe people have just gotten disillusioned, or maybe the periods of non-constitutional rule have fostered people who really do not have these competencies, but they are pushed into those positions by being fostered. So it's a very difficult situation, because really, I say this again and again, the political system today, I'm talking about the system, does not have the competence or the ability to solve Pakistan's complex problems today. We've kicked the can down the road too far, and now we're at the end of this trip.
Right.
We're at the end of the road here. So you need people who have the competence to be able to address Pakistan's issues today. Those are very, very few.
Thank you, very interesting. Can I ask about your bureaucratic class? Do you have people who are up to the level in running a big, complex economy and country like this? And if not, why not?
No, that's the other side of the problem. Till, I would say, the mid-90s, the minister only came into the ministry a few times a week, signed a few files, and that was his only job. He attended cabinet meetings, approved things. Today, if the minister does not provide leadership, the bureaucracy does not have the competence or the experience to resolve the issues of that ministry. Why has that happened? Because we have been left with a very archaic system of governance, which does not allow competence or experience to be built up. For example, if you take the federal government today, you take the petroleum ministry or the power ministry, every decision is in billions of dollars. The people, the secretaries who come there, for example, both the secretaries who are holding these positions today have never ever worked in the federal government. These are all federal officials, but they prefer to work in the provincial governments because the perks are and the power privileges there are much higher. So when they reach the end of their career in the last and when they hold the highest grade in the bureaucracy, they prefer to come back or they're forced to come back to the federal government. So today we have federal officers working at the tehsil level, which is the lowest administrative unit in the provinces. We have people at the federal level, at the district level, people at the division level, people in the provincial governments, all federal officers. This has to change. The provinces should have their own bureaucratic structures, and the federal government needs to specialize. Today, you can be the secretary for power today and can be the secretary for religious affairs the next day. So that experience is not transferable. These are not administrative issues anymore.
Does this country have a school of national administration the way France does, for example?
Yes, we do. We do. It's right next door. But again, the people go through that, but they still remain in the provinces. So they do not have the experience of federal government. They do not have the experience of the issues that federal government has to resolve. So if the minister does not provide leadership, that's why I said earlier, the minister must have those three competencies to be able to deliver governance.
Can I ask a question about your diaspora? You have a lot of extremely talented, in some cases rich, successful, smart people all over the world. Have you thought in Pakistan of bringing back and enlisting their help in bringing your country out of crisis or developing it, to put a more positive spin on what needs to be done here?
Well, I think that's a good point. We have over 9 million Pakistanis working abroad. Even the mayor of London comes from Lahore, Sadiq. So we do have that advantage that we could seek their help. I really think there should be a political change in this country. I think the best form of government and the constitution is the German one. After the war, they have a very good system where the three major political parties, if you are less than 5%, you're out, as you know that. So the three parties which are there, they nominate, if there are 200 members in the parliament in Germany, they say that these are the 200 people that we will get into the parliament, the party. And that is why in Germany you have everybody who's a Dr. Schiller, Dr. Kissinger and all that. So they are not constrained that they have to keep people who are not qualified, as we say. So I think we need to have something in Senate, for example, in Pakistan. If you look at it, there are all kinds of people in Senate who have no place there. I don't want to go into names, but you know, people who are your relatives, who are, somebody was a policeman, he might have helped you. He's become a senator and all that. So the concept of merit in Senate and then Senate is also very important, that it just balances the politics.
Couldn't that be settled with legislation? Isn't that something that your lawmakers could look at? Provisions against nepotism, or is that just a complete no zone in Pakistan? It's an innocent question. I don't know the answer.
I don't think so. I think we need to, as I said, reduce the government. You know, they're simple things. For example, this is one of the few countries in the world where there is no price of water. No price of water. If you have washing your car, you keep on washing your car. If you're giving water to your farms and all that, we don't have any modernization in that also. I mean, if you look at, I do farming also, we have got these pivots. You go from here to Islamabad on the right side, Sukhiya Ki. I use only 20% water. And the rest of and that is why our crops are also distorted. Sugarcane would be never viable in countries like Pakistan. But since you have no price, everybody is doing whatever he wants to do.
Is there a strong farmers' lobby? I mean, I'm surprised the IMF hasn't pressed Pakistan on this point, if they're asking you to get rid of subsidies in other areas.
I don't know why, but they're getting involved in the smaller things, but the IMF is not talking about the water. We are not short of water. If we do have a price of water, I can tell you, we will have no shortage of water in this country. But since we do not price something, then you will misuse it and waste it. So these are very small things, you know, but they need to be done. You know, the price of water is one thing very fundamental to our economics, you know. So we need to do those things, you know. And then, this is a strange country. We have 3 borders. One with India, one with Afghanistan, and one with Iran. We don't trade with anybody.
And what, sir?
We don't trade with anybody. Most of the countries who have done well, do well on the regional trade.
Yes.
America, Canada, Mexico, when NAFTA was made, they said it will be a disaster for America. But that didn't happen. European Union, you look at it. And then Boris Johnson comes in and takes you out of Brexit. And now you have a problem. So I think these are the few fundamental decisions we need to take, you know.
So you're not exploiting your natural overland trading routes with your neighbors. Perhaps that's something that could change in the future with India, for example, with goodwill from both sides.
Well, I am not a politician or, you know, but I do feel that we need to regularize things with India. Come what may be.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's talk a little bit about the factors perhaps beyond Pakistan's control or only partially under your control, and notably climate change and this $9 billion of pledges that your country's gotten from the international community. I'd be curious about both of your reflections, or either of your reflections on this money. Do you think it's well-intended? Will it be well spent? What do we know about it? And will it be one step out of the crisis for Pakistan?
Yeah, Pakistan is a net recipient of the effects of global climate change. Our contribution by any measure in CO2 emissions or any other emissions are much lower on a per capita basis than probably most countries in the world, and certainly probably the lowest amongst the large countries in the world. The money that you've just mentioned, my experience has been that these are mostly promises, and much of it doesn't materialize. So Pakistan has to use its own resources to help the effects of the recent floods. And we must also understand that these floods were not driven by flooding of the rivers. This was driven by rain. And they inundated area which does not have natural drainage. So the water will remain there till it evaporates. And that area is, because it does not have irrigation system as such, it is the poorest of the poor in the Sindh. So the people affected are literally people who were already on some level of subsistence before this tragedy came. So the money that will come or has come needs to be targeted into delivering services and measures which will mitigate the effects of such events in the future.
Do you like what you've heard from the international community? I mean, it's changed a bit of the discourse around Pakistan, right? that you're not just a victim of, your own collective bad decisions, but a victim of Mother Nature in this instance, and that the world has an obligation to help you. I mean, isn't that
yes, I think
a good
the
first
world
step?
has recognized that, and I think the ministers have done a good job, and the Prime Minister in talking about the issue and how it has happened. Almost 1/3 of the country was affected by these floods, and these are unprecedented events.
Yeah.
I mean, even as we sit here today, this is the end of February, and the temperature is 30 degrees. It's never happened before.
Yeah.
So, global warming or whatever, I think you see the effects very clearly in Pakistan.
Okay. Can I turn a bit and ask about your country's relations with the IMF? Because it seems like another dysfunctional relationship, and on both sides. I think we could put some blame on Washington as well, that you get these periodic bailouts. I can't remember that you might know the actual number of IMF programs Pakistan's been through, and
It's
I
been a lot.
I think you know.
23.
Okay.
And only one was completed.
Which one was that?
The one from 2013 to 2018.
Okay. Where was the dysfunction there, and how does one fix that?
Well,
And I believe some of it's in Washington, so let's not, just to be clear, this is not I don't have any narrative on this.
yeah, we have made promises to deregulate, and so we do that when we need the money, and after a few months, that when we are slightly in a better position, then we forget about our commitment to the IMF. And that is now being felt very much in Washington. I think I've seen some statements from the IMF managing director, the lady. I think she's also made some exaggerated statements. The IMF guys don't do that on press and all that. So they have also been rather harsh with us. But the fact of the matter is, we've done 23 programs, and we are back to the same after a few years. And this is happening with other countries also. Argentina, Egypt. They've had so many programs, but 23 they haven't also had. So we need to go through, and our people are now prepared, I think, for the worst. That whatever is going to happen, we'll have to go through. If we mess up with it again, and now that the elections are coming, what's the, so now they want constitutional guarantees, IMF. So I think that's a bit unfair.
How will the elections play into this dynamic? I mean, how will the two things relate?
I think nobody will talk about IMF, but they'll say interest rates have gone up,
Yeah.
our prices have increased of things, For example, in India, the 1 liter of petrol is 300 rupees, and we have now gone to 272. So this was a thing we should have done gradually over the years.
A devaluation, is that what you're
Look
saying?
at the price in UK, your country,
Right.
is much more than here. So the issue is that we need to price things properly, otherwise it will be misused, like what
Right.
I was discussing. So we need to put our house in order and do some of the things that need to be done. The other thing which is a big opportunity for Pakistan is the Thar coal,
The what?
the coal that we have discovered.
Yes.
Thar. Now that's equivalent to the Saudi oil, for example. Now this coal is not only for making power, you can make fertilizer out of it, you can make gas out of it. So we have such a big resource. But the problem is that we haven't made the infrastructure
Yeah.
from Thar to the main roads and to the electricity grid. So that also we need to sort out.
It's a big coal deposit. What part of Pakistan is it in?
In the south.
In the south.
In the south.
At the risk of being obnoxious, I mean, isn't there a bit of a danger when the world has a lot of sympathy for Pakistan as a victim of climate change to be investing big in coal? Or do you think the world will
But we're
understand
not
this?
investing in some things. For example, when you use this coal from Thar, which has a little bit higher moisture, but if you put it in a cement kiln, the temperature that is 1500 degrees, it all evaporates. when you make all the, use it. India, for example, 71% of India's electricity comes from coal.
It does.
And nobody talks about it, you know. So for us, you know, these projects that we have put on, now, we are now a surplus in electricity, and we will be for some years. So I think the Thar coal has to be used, and this chap, Adani, who is a friend of Mr. Modi, is also made his...
You might speak closer, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Adani, they have the Thar coal on the other side of the border also. And he's made power plants, all
Yes.
kind of things, you know.
Yes.
And they have used this much better than us.
Yeah.
The issue is that domestic coal like Thar produces the least cost power. Pakistan has a very small carbon footprint. Most other countries, including the US, are using huge amounts of coal every day. So Pakistan also needs to benefit from its domestic coal. All our other fuels are imported. So the issue today is that we're not able to get financing to put up projects there because financing for coal is very difficult to get now.
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, how are you going to be able to bankroll this?
Yes,
you know?
that is the issue.
Yeah.
I think that's where, let's say we have the IMF program. Now, there's always a underlying political motivation to the IMF. We need to recognize that. The IMF is voluntary. You go to them, they don't come to you. So, and they inject basic financial discipline into your system.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. It's something we should have been doing ourselves. We were unable to do that. Now, circumstances and the IMF impose that on you. And the IMF program opens up other doors for you because the oversight that they provide gives your bilateral partners or the multilaterals confidence that you're on the right path. So that's where we stand today. But I think Pakistan needs to be able to benefit wherever it can provide some relief to its people. And Mr. Mansha mentioned, the Thar coal can be a big part of that. Because our LNG-based plants or the oil-based plants are quite expensive.
Okay. I might be putting you on the spot, but have you applied any thought to how the climate resilience money might be spent? The $9 billion that's coming into Pakistan from the international community after the floods. What kind of projects you should be spending money on in that field?
No, as I said earlier, number one, it's a check in the mail, hasn't arrived yet. So we'll see how much money comes.
Appreciate it.
The first priority should go to the people affected.
Yeah.
But then you have to have mitigation measures on how to avoid such calamities in the future. And beyond that, I think you need to have national policies which contribute to the environment. Because I think Pakistan is probably one of the most affected countries by global warming or the climate change. You can go to any part of the country and the climate has drastically changed within the last 10 years. Huge changes in the climate. So Pakistan needs to use this money to maybe mitigate those measures. More plantation of trees is one thing. Usage of water, how do we use water? And beyond that, the crop patterns perhaps have to change. So there's a lot of work to be done in this area.
And maybe a final provocative question before we throw it open to questions from the audience. Is Pakistan too big to fail? I mean, this is one of the tropes, this is one of the things people always say to me when I'm writing yet another news story about the negotiations with the IMF. Are there calculations in Washington and elsewhere that your country is so important, so strategically delicate, such an important ally in many cases that you'll be given the money or even soft money no matter what?
Unfortunately, a lot of people in the country, in the power structures, subscribe to this theory that Pakistan is too big to fail. And it's a nuclear state, it cannot fail. It's a country of 230 million, it cannot fail. But that's not the reality. If you look at what is failure, today we have 35% inflation. We have, and more pain is to come, because when you have such huge fiscal deficits, For example, the net income of the federal government today does not pay for debt servicing.
Right.
You have to borrow more, which produces more debt servicing for everything else. The current account deficits are very obvious. We don't have enough dollars to pay for our imports. So to mitigate, to counter all these issues, you have to have policies which will result in pain on the common man. And when that happens, the government in power will pay the political price at the polls for taking those tough decisions. So governments shy away from taking those tough decisions.
Right.
Like I said, now it's the end of the road. You don't have a choice anymore.
No.
Like we vacillated too long, and there's no room left to vacillate anymore.
No. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to say that what he's saying is right, but I think we need to remember one thing. By exporting enough to cover our imports is never going to happen in the short term. You know the countries which are been deficit for 30 years. Even the US is one of them. We need to get foreign direct investment. FDI has to come in, and it was coming in the past. In India, for example, BlackRock, a hedge fund, is investing $100 billion.
Who is, sorry?
BlackRock.
Yes.
And out of that, 40 billion has been, spent. That's why their reserves were always 2 to 3 times than us. We have 4 billion. They should normally have 12 billion. They now have 700 billion. So we need to get foreign direct, and for those things we need to create conditions that people who come. Similarly, if you look at Prince Salman, he's invested $7.5 billion in Reliance, Ambani's company. So we need to give that business-friendly approach that we need to find. You know what happened in India when big Ambani, Dhirubhai Ambani died? So the two brothers were having a problem. So the mother called up the Prime Minister. He said, my two sons don't agree on what we are doing, and there is a family feud. The Prime Minister flew to Bombay, spent the whole day to resolve their issues. This is what I'm saying is that there is an approach that you want to help people who are trying to create jobs, to create new industries, and to bring FDI into the country.
That's worth applauding, I think.
Yeah, let me just differ a little bit with Mansha Saab. We don't differ often, but today, the captains of industry in this country and commerce in this country need to play their role. I think they've always gone for the low-hanging fruits, and there are plenty here, and they've been successful. If you look at Pakistan's current account issues, it's just a question of $20 billion of exports. On a global scale, that's not a huge challenge. And for a country of 230 million, it should not be a huge challenge, but it is.
Right.
Because in 75 years, we've gone to 30 billion of exports. So adding 20 is a big challenge. But if you look at other countries, they've managed that in less than a decade.
No.
So Pakistan, there needs to mobilize its own resources and provide those exports. The FDI will come only if there is a security situation is resolved, there is political stability in the country, there is stability of policy, and there is an environment which is supportive of investment.
Right.
We do not have all these 4 factors today, unfortunately.
Very, very well said. We didn't have time to talk about security yet, but I'm mindful of leaving some time for questions. So if you could please put up your hands, introduce yourself if possible, keep your question very brief, don't make speeches that aren't questions. I see, oh wait, yeah, that's much easier. I see a man in a blue shirt with glasses right there. Someone could get him a mic. Oh, is it here already? Go right ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Humaira Sheikh, and thank you for this discussion. We've discussed the economy of Pakistan, and we've discussed how we can make the economy better. But what about the people? We have not discussed how to make the life of the people better. Because it's the people of a country who make the country. And if their needs are not looked after, for example, the CPR rate is below 30 even today in Pakistan. We are facing overpopulation, not because of fundamentalism, but because the prevalence rate is too low. We have people hungry. There's a lot of hunger in this country. When have we made policies where we consult with the poor person, where we consult with the people who have been affected to come up with policies or manage issues? So I would just like to bring that to the point. We have discussed economy, we have discussed richness and all of that, but what about the poor?
Would you like to address that?
Yeah. I think it's the issue is very simple. Why do you have a government? Why do you have a constitution? Is to work for the welfare of the people of the country. There's no other reason. And it's very obvious that we have failed there. So if you talk about consulting the people, it's their representatives who should be in the parliament. That has not happened. There have been many factors. So if you, it all comes back. It's almost a circular issue. It all comes back to respecting the will of the people of Pakistan. I think if you don't do that, you will not go very far.
Does that answer your question? Good, thank you. Next question.
I'm Ali Inan. I'm an assistant professor as well. I'm teaching as well. So my question is that we are discussing a sort of a power failure in Pakistan. For state formation, it is necessary that there must be some institutionalization of power, and for sustaining a market, we need some deinstitutionalization of power as well. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, where there is a need of institutionalization of power, we observe a massive personalization of power. And where we need deinstitutionalization, there is a massive institutionalization of power. So you, as a leading politician, I think both as leading businessmen as well, how do you see that we are going to manage this power shift to ensure a more sustainable market in Pakistan? That how can we get rid of this, especially the personalization of power in Pakistan? Thank you.
That's a really good question. Thank you.
Look, when you have a constitutional failure, you will have personalization of power, because you will not build systems which provide the institutionalization of power. Unfortunately, because of long periods of military rule, we have not been able to go beyond the personalization of power. Our constitution is very explicit. We have one of the most explicit constitutions in the world, which provides for almost every eventuality. It provides for devolution of power, it provides for institutionalization, but we've not been able to follow the constitution. So these are things which evolve. You cannot one day inject institutionalization into a system. If you look at the British or the American system, they've institutionalized their governance. We have unfortunately failed to do that. I've met US members of Congress and members of Parliament in the UK, and I can tell you they are as good or as bad as we are. But they have institutionalized the system, so they have institutionalized protection available to the people of that country. We have not been able to do that. So I think this process has to evolve. We have not given it time to evolve. That's the basic answer to that question.
Honorable ex-Prime Minister Mansha Sahab, my question is mainly on the organs of state which are now fighting amongst themselves. As we see the benches which are like-minded. Unfortunately, we are seeing the politicians which are fighting amongst themselves, whose job is to create consensus for the people and for the masses. What do the both panelists believe that the people should do, or the politicians should do, to bring consensus among the masses and the general public and among the politicians themselves? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure the answer to the question you've raised, but I must tell you, good governance will ultimately bring all the problems that we are facing. And if you look at countries like Korea, for example, they started and we started at the same level. President Park one day called 9 big companies and said, you will have to do these things. All these Samsungs, Hyundais and all that. Those companies built not only a governance for themselves, for the country. They built not only factories, they built schools, they built hospitals. So this is one model that we can see what is happening. The other successful country, and you will see, is Indonesia. In another 10 years, Indonesia will surpass all European countries and will be probably the 4th or 5th largest private sector GDP country. After 3 army coups, Sukarno, Suharto, and their daughter Megawati, they went through all that, and now the new president was the mayor of Jakarta, with 17,000 islands that country has. And look at the progress they are making. Similarly, we've got this thing about corruption. Now, I was looking at it. If you have good governance and you good development, all these pieces come together. In Philippines, Mr. Marcos is now the president, the son of the late dictator, to whom we attribute so many of corruption scandals and all these things. So I think we need to basically bring in good governance. The rest will all follow. And
let me just say that politics is a process of natural conflict. So that conflict will remain. But the question of the conflict between the organs of state, that's a real issue. Because whenever you extend beyond the ambit that the Constitution provides for you, you will have a conflict which is destructive. And that's happening to Pakistan for quite some time today. That's a question we need to address. Mr. Mansha talked about this corruption and accountability issue. And you have a dedicated National Accountability Bureau, which, if you look at the resources and the facilities they have, are phenomenal. But my question to them always has been, please tell me, and this institution was built to provide accountability for politicians. So my question has always been, and as somebody who spent 13 years in NAB courts, I've only asked them one question. How many politicians have you convicted? And you'll be surprised at the answer. And I've answered every question that NAB has ever asked me. Every question in the world. They would not ask me one question. One question they did not ask. How much tax did you pay? So if you want accountability, use the tax laws. If your leaders cannot justify their lifestyle, they cannot justify their expenses, they don't deserve to belong in the parliament.
Hello? Over here. Hi. So my question is from Mr. Abbasi. So I'm an economic journalist, and I have to say that reading and writing about the economy has a big source of depression for all of us. So I would just like to highlight on the issue of circular debt, which is also a big point of contention with the IMF. So I would like to ask that you were the Ministry of Power for a very long time, and even right now, I'm sure you do have an influence on that. Why are we still dealing with two major problems such as line losses and the non-recovery of bills? And what's the government doing right now to curb these issues? And secondly, I would also like to ask that what's the government thinking about introducing newer ways of energy, for example, solar energy?
Okay, I think you asked something which is very close to my heart. I've never been the power minister, but I worked with them. The circular debt has 3 basic elements. Number 1 is the funded subsidies provided in the budget. So the IMF addresses that. So those are funded and the money mostly becomes available. Then you have the unfunded subsidies, where you provide the subsidy, but you do not provide for money or funds for them in the budget. So that becomes part of the circular debt. The IMF is today addressing that also. So hopefully you will not have any unfunded subsidies. Then comes the losses in the system. And it's basically a issue with the discourse. Now, and this was surprising for me also when I looked at the numbers, the discourse live within the line losses provided by the regulator in the tariff. So where does the circular debt arise from? It arises from, number one, theft. There is massive theft in the system. And number two, from non-collection of dues. They bill, there is a meter, they bill, but they don't collect all the dues. So the answer really lies in the 18th Amendment. In the 18th Amendment, we provided the provinces with the resources, but we did not transfer the responsibilities to them. So today, we need to transfer the responsibility of delivering the governance to collect, to stop theft and to collect the unpaid dues to the provinces. They need to be responsible for that. And then you will resolve the system. It's our biggest problem today. Over 500 billion rupees are lost to this.
This question.
There's something else also. What he's saying is right. The government should transfer all the discourse to the provincial governments. And if you look at Hyderabad, they collect only 18%. Peshawar, they collect 24% of the total dues. In Balochistan is less than 10%. In Lahore, Islamabad, it's about 92, 93 or 91%. So you, under the 18th Amendment, you should try to give this discourse to them. And if they don't collect, and you have to collect money for the electricity because that's coming from the national grid, then you deduct their grants that they get billions of rupees under the 18th Amendment. वो उसको काट लें आप, take it away. So this will become right, or privatize these discos, and everything will be all right.
Privatization is really the only solution. You have to privatize. But who will provide, who will buy an entity which is losing tens of billions of rupees when the provincial government does not provide the security situation or the legal situation to recover those dues?
You're referring to a specific.
These are the distribution companies in Pakistan. So the losses of the distribution companies are equal, or what we call the circular debt, are equal to the whole running of the federal government in Pakistan. Wow. It's not a small number.
So we have a question here, right here in front.
Thank you for this totally brilliant and frank discussion. It's so impressive that at a public forum, the sort of frankness that one has heard, it is to be applauded. I want to ask you just one very small, short question, and that is to the Honorable former Prime Minister. Are you not afraid of reprisals after what you have discussed?
No.
From India.
No, fear is But I think personally, I mean, if somebody tells you he's fearless, he's a big liar. So fear is natural. But I think personally, I've come to a stage where I don't aspire to a job, I don't aspire to favors. So I think I can speak openly, speak, and with the experience that I've had, I think I have the authority to speak on these issues also. I've also spent 3 years in jail, so jail does not, I don't fear jail anymore. So that helps.
I think we've got to wrap up soon. Time for maybe one more question? Yeah.
Yeah, here on the top. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. Towards your right, yeah, here, I'm standing. So, my name is Wasi Haider. I have a bachelor's degree in economics and political science, and I have a master's degree in Chinese economy and Chinese politics. Why I'm telling you this is because we're talking about competence here. My question here relates, I mean, I love the discussion and I disagreed with most than not. But I don't have the time to ask all my questions. My simple question is for people like me, and I speak on the behalf of most of us here, is that how can the youth come forward and play a role into giving Pakistan the direction that it needs in the future? Mr. Prime Minister mentioned, he questioned actually the competence of the National Assembly, and Mr. Mansha questioned the competence of the Senate. But my question is that youth like me, I've been, for example, somebody like me who wants to pursue his career in politics, how can I come forward? Who would, for example, if Mr. Mansha or somebody who's got the money is willing to finance that campaign, then, no, that's not the question yet. If somebody's willing to question that campaign, the idea is that this whole system that we've borrowed from the British and then imposed on this country is not organic. So we need to have a system
Can you
which
please ask your question?
which is our own. So my question to Mr. Ex-Prime Minister is that how can the youth play a role, constitutional role, not just a moral role, a constitutional role into building this country? Thank you.
Look, as far as the system is concerned, I think we've tried every system in the world. And the only system that will work in Pakistan is the parliamentary form of government. And this is because of the fractures that or the divisions we have in the country. The provincial divisions, the ethnic divisions. We need to be cognizant of these things because these results in breaking up of countries or balkanization of countries. What can the youth do? I told you in the beginning, join politics. You make that sacrifice. So, make that, be part of the political system. Don't be agnostic to the system. You know, I've heard many people say, you know, I've never voted, so I went to vote this time because so-and-so was running. So, if you don't vote, I think the British politician Churchill said that if you don't vote, then you'll get fools like me in the parliament. So it's not a profession, it's a calling. And it requires sacrifice. Please understand that. We do not respect our politicians, and in most cases rightly so. But you must respect the system. You must respect that people who go there, when we talk in the parliament with passion, or even when there are fist fights, they are not personal issues. They are issues that concern the people of Pakistan. So yes, we take part in the political process. It's available to you, take part in it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, one more. Yeah, we got time.
My name is Shahid Hamid. I'm a retired senior advocate of the Supreme Court. I have two questions, one for Mian Mansha, one for the former Prime Minister. Mian Sahab, my question to you, and I apologize in advance if you find my question a little, or both of you, a trifle offensive. According to the report of Dr. Ishrat Hussain, the workforce in Pakistan is 65 million. The total number of employees of the federal and provincial governments and all their autonomous bodies is 3.2 million. That's a little less than 5% of the total workforce. 95% of that workforce is in grades 1 to 16, non-gazetted, lower income groups. Mian Sahab, you know better than me that your colleagues, not you, but your colleagues are laying off thousands of workers. How many more do you want unemployed at this time? By reducing the size of the government, which in international terms, less than 5%, is not very high. And you were talking about the pricing of water. The Supreme Court, I know because I was appearing in that case, they tried to price water, especially for the beverage industries, and it was resisted tooth and nail by the business community. Recently, the government has imposed a 5% super tax on high-income earners. Every one of those industries has fought tooth and nail in all the high courts and the Supreme Court against that tax.
Could I ask you to formulate your question, please?
Yeah, I'm asking Mian Sahab to comment on this. And Mr. Former Prime Minister, you have said that more than half the senators have bought their way there.
you have said you are finding it difficult to find 3 competent people in the National Assembly. Then what are you proposing? That we bring back the establishment? Maybe that's the right answer, because the historical data shows that the economic performance of the establishment was much better than all the civilian governments, whether it was the Ayub Khan, Ziaul Haq, or...
Thank you. Let's leave time for the panelists to respond to this, please, and then we'll wrap up then. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Look, the people who come into the Senate through these means, they've been fostered by the establishment. So the establishment is not the solution, it's the problem. The establishment has a constitutional role. When they go outside that role, you have a problem. I had King Abdullah visiting Pakistan when I was Prime Minister. So there was pictures of in the hallway of all the Prime Ministers. So I started telling her, I said, this one we shot, this one we hanged. And, almost 80% we put in jail. So that's what has happened to Pakistan. So when I talk about the lack of competency, that's the problem. The competency does not parachute in. It cannot be imported. It is built with it. It evolves from the system. If the system does not evolve, the people will not evolve. So that's where we have failed. We need to let the system work. I would venture to say 3 fair elections and the system will work out its kinks. But 3 fair elections, that's all you need. Let the process, but that needs 15 years. Should have happened 50 years back. It did not happen. We are paying the price today.
Yeah, thank you. Mian, would you like to respond before we finish?
Yeah, I want to answer our friend, the lawyer. What he was talking about, people don't want to pay taxes. People will pay taxes if they know their taxes are being fairly spent, and they know that you are taking tax. For example, the 5% you mentioned, the government has put a super tax on the previous year's income. Now everything is closed. You paid taxes in that period, and now you come back and with a fairy tale that you need to give, last 5 years, piche chale gaye. So what I'm saying is that the government needs to be fair about it. About jobs, I have no problem in answering you. Create conditions, and you will get thousands of jobs like Bangladesh has done. My wife also works, and she came up with idea one day that she wants to have a factory. So I said, make a school, that's a fashionable thing. So she said, no, I want to have We've created thousands of jobs. I employ over 50,000 people. And in only our textile division, now we have over 30,000. And a woman or a man, it will take him 20 days to be trained for a garment worker. Create conditions, the jobs will automatically be made. Create conditions. For example, I told when he was the Chief Minister, Mr. Shahid, that don't go for these new estates. The ones that are already working, like they are working in Chittagong or in Colombo, I've been there, they collect all the water which needs to be cleaned in one place. They give all kind of facilities to them. Then create maybe restaurants where designers can come in and sit down. Nobody wants to come here because look at the conditions. I told General Bajwa one day, I said, General Sahab, how can a person come to Pakistan? An American goes to get a visa, and I think, Mr. Reid, you have been through that. You can't get a visa. So the buyers don't come here. When somebody comes, his flight arrives at 3 o'clock at night, and he wants to go through cantonment. No American or British can come through cantonment. What kind of welcome you are giving to your buyers? These things, these reforms will take 10 minutes to do. Sab cheezon ko, why are we doing all this? So do that. And you, in your community, let me tell you something. There are 22,000 lawyers in Lahore. What do they do? Only stay orders. And what do the judges do? 22,000 lawyers in Lahore. Roz jhagda. Today there is a strike, today is this, that, you know. You need to reform yourselves. Don't tell us.
On that note, very impassioned answers to a fascinating discussion. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists.